Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the Fall Festoon as presented by Sultry Art. My name is Brian Salawada. I am one of the founders and trustees of Sultry Art. I'm also the principal artist for the company, as well as a big fan of bees, as I'm sure you are as well. For those of you that are discovering Sultry Art for the first time, we are a nonprofit with a mission of creating rich community spaces that unite arts and ecology in unexpected, educational, and inspiring ways. I invite you to go to sultry.art at some point, not right now, but at some point after the broadcast, check out all the different activations that we produce and find out how you can be a part of it. We love growing our community, so please join us. There are a few things I want to tell you about before we get started here. The first is that we are operating off of our webpage primarily today, so that's sultry.art/fallfestoon. If you are on that page, then you already see that we have a whole lot of activities that are happening. We have our 3 live events. This is the first of those, as well as an online art gallery that's all bee themed. We've got make-along activities. So if you're looking for something to do with the kids, I totally recommend it. You can make a bee hydration station or puppets, all sorts of cool stuff. And then we also have our Waggle It dance, which is a crowd favorite. We teach you how to waggle like bees, and it's hilarious. So absolutely learn, waggle, and share with us. If you are watching on Facebook Live or YouTube Live, great, love that. We want you to engage with us today. So you have a chat feature over there. By all means, use it. You can talk to each other, but you can also talk to us. So put your messages over there. I will check out some of those questions, and during the Q&A portions of our interview here, I will check those out, bring them up onto the screen, and we can talk to them. Feel free to chat whenever you want, ask questions whenever you want, but also we will likely not get to those questions right away, so be patient and we'll get to your answers. I think that's all the housekeeping I have right now. I do want to emphasize one more time, because it's worth repeating, that this is live, which means anything can happen. Technically, things always happen. So should stuff go awry, be patient, bear with us. We will get it back up and running. Life is good right here. Okay, that's it. That's the housekeeping. I think we are ready to get started, and I'm very excited about today's conversation. It is my absolute privilege to introduce you to our panelists. So up first, I would like to introduce you to Nicole HARTERY. She is from Bees on Main Street. She is an urban beekeeper and entrepreneur in the Philadelphia region. And she is working for a community of inclusion in beekeeping. And I'm so happy to have you there today. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, how you doing, Brian?
I am great. Thank you for being here. We also have on the panel today a crowd favorite, Nick HOEFLY. Nick comes to us from Astor Apiaries. I'm going to get it right, Nick, I promise. Comes to us from Astor Apiaries. He is a master beekeeper and the founder of what has become one of the leading apiaries in New York City. He has a passion for public education and community outreach, and we are thrilled to have him back with us. Hello there, Nick.
How you doing today?
Very good. Thank you again for being here. And last but certainly not least of all is Mr. Mike Hollis. Mike comes to us from Services for the Underserved, where he manages a therapeutic horticultural program that uses beekeeping as a wellness tool in support of individuals with disabilities. It is an incredible program, and he's an incredible guy, and it's his birthday today. How you doing, Mike?
Hello.
Yep, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
What a fun way to celebrate it, right? So I would like to begin a little bit by giving you each about 5 minutes or so just to introduce yourselves, talk about what it is that you do, put it in your own words, and maybe even give us a little bit about how you got started, if that's all right. And to begin with, I'd like to start with Nicole. So Nicole, I'm handing you the virtual mic.
Okay. Well, I just basically got started because I was working in the mortgage industry and I really wanted to get out of it and do something I was passionate about. And, I feel like it was definitely divine intervention, because it was just like a lot of pondering and thinking and meditating and praying, and beekeeping just came to mind. And prior to this, I did not know anyone in beekeeping or anything like that. So I just started looking up schools. New Jersey, I'm in New Jersey, exactly where I'm located. So I live along the river of Philadelphia. So you can see Philadelphia from my house. So in New Jersey, we are a very big agricultural state. So I started off looking up programs for the state and other schools. And then Rutgers University offered a beginner's beekeeping program. And from there, I took that program. I wound up assisting them. So they became my mentors. And from there, my company, I started building my company. And exactly what I do, I do a lot of traveling because I am urban beekeeper. So something that 2020 has kind of hindered was a lot of the traveling to schools that I did, doing educational presentations and all of that. However, I do private lessons, and primarily my clients are people who were doing beekeeping longer than me, but didn't get, proper training and everything like that. So I go over, basics as far as like proper way of inspections. And then I also assist other beekeepers. A lot of them are farmers, so they don't have the time to actually tend to their bees because they're farming. So I assist them, do inspections, whatever needs to be done there. Swarm collections, I do all of that. And I harvest and sell honey as well.
Very cool. So that's a lot.
I know. I was trying to like not be too lengthy and trying to get it in all.
Oh, no. I commend you on the amount of the many hats that you're wearing in beekeeping right now. And one thing that I noticed that is certainly worth mentioning is you do Instagram live interviews with other beekeepers.
Yeah.
I've watched a couple of them, and it's incredible the community that you're able to bring together all around bees.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's actually just something that kind of just came to mind because when I started beekeeping, 2020, a personal project of mine, I had certain places to travel in the country, and I wanted to personally meet other beekeepers. Well, with 2020 nixing that, and with everything going on, through the internet, I was able to meet other beekeepers of color. And it's when you get into beekeeping and some of the conversations I've had with some of the other beekeepers, we've all kind of felt this same exact way, that it's a wonderful community. But it also, when you think, oh my gosh, am I the only person of color doing this around here? You know what I mean? It also feels a bit isolating, and it also feels like a sense of responsibility too. So when you find out, oh, this person lives in Ohio, this person, you know what I mean? It was like, okay, well, now I felt a sense of responsibility to kind of get to know each other and kind of spread the word on each other. Because I think we all did the same thing. We all Googled like Black beekeepers, and the only people that came up were Detroit hives.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought, oh my gosh, Detroit hives are the only Black beekeepers. So it's just trying to kind of get us together, build a sense of community, and also get to know each other aside from beekeeping as well. Because everybody has a different story,
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice to like learn how they got into it and their lives as well, because you have beekeepers who are mothers and fathers and just into different things and how they got into beekeeping. So I love doing that because I love sharing their stories.
It's incredibly cool. And obviously, thank you for doing the work, bringing the stories together, and also thanking on behalf of the bees themselves. I really appreciate acknowledging the fact that there are so many different reasons why a person would be involved in beekeeping. One of the things that I think our Festoon event is doing today is kind of highlighting some of the variety in there. We're an arts organization, so there are people that are in the beekeeping specifically for the arts. There are people that are in it for cultural preservation reasons, and there are certainly people that are in it for environmental reasons, as well as people that are looking for the money that comes from it. So socioeconomic reasons to be in there too. Although I have to confess, I don't know any rich beekeepers. So maybe we'll meet some today. Very cool. So I have a lot more questions for you, but I want to give the microphone to Nick here. Much the same thing. If you want to just tell us a little bit about what you do, how you got involved, and maybe a little bit about Astor Apiaries too.
Sure. So when I got into beekeeping, it mainly was because I had I had a new space. I just bought a house and I had a space to do something with, whether I was going to put a garden in our little front yard or what I was going to do with maybe our rooftop, maybe put a garden up there. I got talking with a friend of mine, and bees came up in the conversation. We each got a hive, and they ended up going up on my roof that first year. And from that point on, it just every year I added a couple hives. That's usually the story that you hear with beekeepers, but that's certainly what happened with me. And after the first year, it was so much fun that in the second year, I thought, well, maybe I could sell enough honey to kind of pay for the equipment. And then it just blew up from there. So it's been great. Of course, we started Astor Apiaries to kind of be the legitimate front of our rooftop honey sales. And since then, we've started doing work for some corporate clients, some residential clients. We help manage beehives completely, or we go in and help mentor new beekeepers. This year in particular, Nicole was kind of mentioning the pandemic, how it's really changed the way that we had to, figure things out for this year. So this year we've done a lot of virtual stuff. Being a farm, being essentially a farm, we've all been essential workers. So the bees haven't really suffered too much as far as not getting visited during this whole time, but it has really changed the way that we've been able to do a lot of our in-person events. So we haven't done so many markets, we haven't done so many classes, all those things that I'm really excited to get back to next year. But anyway, yeah, we're based here in New York City. We serve the city, of course, Long Island. We go upstate a little bit. We have a couple clients up in Westchester, and certainly we haven't gone out to New Jersey quite as far as Nicole yet, but we're around if people need us. So.
Very cool, Nick. Roughly how, it's a bit of a trick question because I think I sort of know the answer to this, but how many hives do you operate?
So between our own hives and hives that we manage for others, it's about 50. Of our own hives, it's about half of that. And yeah, the other ones where there might be a residential client of ours that has 3 hives up on their roof, or someone else who has, 15 hives elsewhere. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's, I want to be the person with 15 hives on my roof to have that much roof. All right, so obviously I have more questions for you too, but let's bring Mike onto the stage here so he can tell us a little bit about how he got started and a little bit about what he does with therapeutic horticulture at Services for the Underserved.
Hello, so how I got started. Been very interested in urban agriculture overall for quite a while, but about, I think it was 12 years ago, was just kind of going through different meetups that had to do with sustainability in New York City. And at the time, the New York City beekeeping meetup offered a winter course in beekeeping for any New Yorker that was interested. It was still illegal to keep bees at the time in New York, so it was all very kind of hands-off lecture style instructional, and then once you completed the course, you could kind of do little hands-on practicums with folks that were keeping bees in quieter backyards or out of the way of the site of the Department of Health in community gardens. So got some hands-on work with bees over the course of the first couple of years after I did that training. But then in 2013, I started working with Services for the Underserved. It's a social service agency in New York City that supports individuals with disabilities, kind of a pretty wide range of disabilities, from behavioral health and mental health challenges to developmental and intellectual disabilities. So they have considerable space and a lot of backyards that are associated with supportive housing for the individuals that they serve. And in those backyards, we've been able to launch a therapeutic horticulture program where we do farming, all sorts of gardening, whether it's for food or for just kind of creating a green space recreationally. And about a year after I began managing their therapeutic horticulture program, we began a beekeeping initiative. There had been some interest just in chatting about pollinators and their impact on the gardens and farms that we work with. And some of the individuals felt like they really wanted to jump in. So we started with a single hive in Brooklyn and have just kind of slowly expanded. We now have 4 hives overall. And the opportunity is a pretty wonderful one in that I think that the folks that are involved in working with the hives are really loving, of course, just the skill that they're getting from being able to do beekeeping, but then are kind of taking that and expanding that into, for instance, farmers markets work. So we bottle the honey and then they have been selling it the last couple of years at different farmers markets in Queens and in Brooklyn. They have started doing added value products with it, so making everything from skin balms to different flavor infused honeys. So it's just kind of been a really neat vehicle for engaging individuals in a really interesting skill set.
Very cool, Mike. I'm curious, and this kind of be sort of the foundation for a larger question for everybody in a minute here, but I'm curious if you've seen any transformation stories since the program has begun.
Yes is the short answer. To kind of give a little bit of context, we have for the organization overall about 35,000 folks that we are serving each year. Within urban farms, about 500 are kind of regular participants that are kind of stewards for our garden spaces and are engaging with our initiatives and programs in a regular way. So it's sometimes hard to parse out impact that would be solely from beekeeping versus from overall service offerings or just involvement in the therapeutic horticulture program in general. But we'll certainly say that I think that the opportunities that it's created for folks to interact with the public has absolutely created really interesting changes for some of the folks in both kind of their vocational pathways. So recognizing that they really like interacting with the public and they love customer service interaction and want to go in that direction. And also just being able to kind of showcase the work that they're doing. So being able to call themselves a beekeeper and to be able to chat with the public and farmers market about harvesting honey from their hive in Brooklyn. And I think that interaction has considerable value for a lot of the people that we're working with as well.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And actually, kind of, I have so many questions for all of you all, but this one kind of leads nicely into this, which is a question centered around like perceptions of beekeeping and beekeepers in general. Specifically, we are a panel right now of city beekeepers, but we obviously know that beekeeping is necessary for agricultural reasons. Bees have to do the pollinating. But I know that there are a fair amount of folks, as you're mentioning, Nicole, that are working in beekeeping for other reasons. They are in it for the honey, or in case of Service to the Underserved, they're in it for the therapeutic or horticultural elements of working with beekeeping. Do you see, how to phrase, do you think that there is a perception of a beekeeper in the city that is different than that of agricultural or a rural beekeeper?
I definitely think so. I would say, actually, a lot of beekeepers that I speak with, I would say that most beekeepers are not city beekeepers. We're probably in the minority on that. It's becoming much bigger, but still, most people are setting up bees are out in the country somewhere. So when you mention that you have hives on a roof, or that you we take care of some hives in a cemetery in Brooklyn. So when people hear that and hear that we kind of just are putting our hives wherever they can fit, wherever they can safely be, that's a real novelty still to a lot of even beekeepers, let alone just people who think it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Nicole, Phil, I didn't ask you in the first place. Do you actually have hives of your own as well?
Yes, I actually have, I keep 4 hives right now. I have 2 on the roof of my home, and local animal hospital allows me to use their property and keep bees there as well. So it's like exactly what Nick said, you know, it's like we keep them where we can. So our bees are, the purpose are just simply to pollinate. You know, we don't have them pollinating crops like a lot of what beekeepers have, like specifically. They're just pollinating our neighborhoods and gardens and all of that. So being an urban beekeeper is very special to me, because I feel like when you meet another urban beekeeper, a lot of it is going into it for all the same reason. And it's all because you have this passion about the bees, because we don't get into it necessarily for the honey. It's something that kind of grows. So yeah, so exactly what Nick said, kind of get in where you can fit in.
Yeah. I would imagine that space is one of the many somewhat unique challenges to urban beekeeping, as opposed to having the fields and farms that come with rural spaces. Are there other challenges that you see that you could identify as specifically urban?
I would say ladders. That's probably one of the biggest things. Nobody realizes that the equipment that goes up is a lot lighter than the equipment that comes down. So a regular box of honey that we take off the roof can be 50 pounds, easy. And so coming down ladders, with all the hives that I deal with, we have 2 locations that have a 1-story ladder climb, and that's all that I will do, because it's scary and just not very responsible to be trying to lug that stuff up and down. So and kind of what goes with that is heights as well. I don't know how your roof is set up, Nicole, but luckily here my bees are actually just up on the roof behind me, but I'm in a townhouse, so I'm attached on both sides. I love that, because if I do need to step away from the hives, I have a little bit extra space to go. But there's other places where we put the hives kind of, in the safest spot on the roof, but you can't run, 20 feet in one direction without stepping off the edge. So that's probably one of like the most dramatic differences. Other than that, there's so much that is the same when it comes to taking care of bees in the city and taking care of the bees in the country. You do your inspections the same. You're working with the same kind of equipment. We might not be harvesting as much honey, but you're harvesting honey and putting it through an extractor, just like someone who doesn't live in the city. So there's a lot of similarities, but the differences are very much the logistics of where the hives are.
I would imagine, though I can't speak for attendance, that it would public perception might be a challenge. Mike, you mentioned that beekeeping was illegal in New York City up until fairly recently, and I know that's true for a lot of cities. Have any of you run into challenges with the neighbors?
So I would say that while I've only done urban beekeeping, I haven't really experienced it in a rural setting. I would imagine that the educational component to beekeeping is much more prevalent for an urban beekeeper. So we have our hives in Brooklyn, for instance, in a backyard. So definitely within eyesight of a couple of the neighboring brownstones. We certainly have had one neighbor that raised concerns and actually came over and we had kind of a really excellent hour where we just kind of talked about beekeeping together, and then actually did a hive inspection with her there, had her taste the honey, and I think she left feeling much more assured that the bees weren't a threat to her yard or to her family. Just a much stronger appreciation for urban pollinators in general. So I think that that's not necessarily an interaction that you would expect on a large, like 50-acre farm where the bees really aren't something quite as front and center as they would be in a backyard or rooftop in a city.
Are there any particular regulations that govern where you can and cannot keep hives in an urban space?
Yes, definitely here in New Jersey. That's actually one of the reasons why I chose my roof. The rules in New Jersey just kind of counteract each other too. They'll say, oh, you have to have it this way, this far away from a sidewalk, but then you have to have it this far away from your neighbor's yard. You have to have a fenced yard. It's very confusing. So according to the law, I would have to have it like smack dab in the middle of my yard, because I'm in a twin. So it's me and another house attached, and I'm not on the corner of it. You know what I mean? So I have yards on both sides. So that's actually what made me say, you know what, let me do it on my roof. And I have really good neighbors that really are happy about having Beekeeper as a neighbor, you know, so I get a lot of good feedback. But I think because I'm on my roof as well, you know, I think you know what I mean? It's definitely far away. It's kind of tucked and hidden, you know. So like even in the summertime or spring when the leaves and everything, you can't really see them from my roof. You can see them more in the wintertime. But I think maybe if they were on the ground, I probably would have had like a little fears or anything like that. Like my mentors actually have dealt with that. So that's why I was like, you know what? I think my roof is a safe place.
Yep. It makes sense that everyone would also be, all three of you mentioned education as a component to your urban beekeeping. So it seems like it is a necessary component. Going back a little bit to community, which seems to be a centerfold to all three of your practices. I think my general question right now is, what is it about beekeeping that lends its hand so nicely to be a vehicle for community building? And go ahead, Nicole.
Okay, well, I specifically do children's presentations. So I travel to schools. So for me, it was more about just exposing the kids to beekeeping, and because pollinators in general are dying off. So it was more about letting them know, like, look, this is something you can get into, you can help, you can do your part. And it's also entrepreneurial, you know, type of work. So for me, it was more about the exposure to it and giving a choice, because I wasn't. And then you have more teachers who are discussing the pollinators dying off and how important it is. So that's usually where I come in when they're specifically teaching those programs. And you do have a lot of kids that go, oh, you know, I'm interested in this. And it also, the kids that aren't, it also helps, you know, letting them know, like, you can get involved in your gardens too, you know, community gardens, or just at your house, and get the family all together. So that for me, it was specifically reaching out to the children, you know, getting them while they were young, so that at least they know there's an option. Because I have 2 daughters myself too. So for me, it was something when I was in school, I wasn't exposed to or anything like that. So I thought, you know, this would be a good way to reach out kids. And also when I walk in, they see an Afro-Latina woman. So it's, you know, it kind of like, if that's their first impression of a beekeeper, then it pretty much opens the world to them. You know, they have the impression that anybody can do it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm hearing that answer is also just the sense of power that comes with feeling you have a way of control and engaging in some bigger issues, like pollinators dying off, and it feels like, what can you do? And giving people that tool, I absolutely see how that is extremely, oh, I'm getting a little verklempt about this, extremely powerful when it comes to community building. Nick, did you have anything to add? There you go.
Really, yeah. I think the thing that engages people so much about beekeeping versus other things when you do bring it into a classroom or you go to an event and tell people about the bees is the fact that ever since we're kids, we're taught about staying away from these stinging creatures, from these stinging insects. They're all bad. And it's a real cool contrast to go in and show someone a picture of you in a suit covered in bees and, you know, not being worried about it, or having a handful of bees and not getting stung, and being able to explain to people that, you know, there's a difference between wasps and bees, and there's all these different insects have their place. And not to mention that fact that if you want to go see a lot of agriculture, especially if you're in a city, you really have to leave the city to go see it. But for beekeeping, it's right here. The bees will actually come and visit you if you put out flowers. So there's a lot of real good touch points that can be made with beekeeping versus, you know, other types of ways to get involved with the environment. So I think that's a really powerful way to you know, get people more aware of their environment and of some of these more green ideas that we all kind of need to think about more.
Mm-hmm. There's something beautifully poetic about the notion that the bees will come to you if you put out flowers.
Exactly.
Yeah, I do the same. Mike, I see you're kind of moving your. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. So I was thinking with some of the folks that I'm working with, where there's so much stigma for them, just in the different challenges that they're facing. There's a lot of stigma around mental illness. There's a lot of stigma around developmental disabilities. And I think when they are looking at vocational pursuits, unfortunately, it's still the case that oftentimes they're pigeonholed towards jobs that I think don't have a high value in public perception. So not that there's not value to it, but so often they're only considered for things like janitorial roles or some landscaping positions. And what I've seen with the folks that have been doing beekeeping for us is a change in the public perception of those individuals. It kind of breaks the stigma a bit. So Nick mentioned how from childhood we're kind of taught to fear these bees, but then there's also this understanding of how important they are for pollination and for the environment, and there's our kind of love for honey. So I think that there's this natural fascination with bees because there's something you're afraid of, but also something that are vital and fascinating in themselves. So to be able to interact with someone in having a conversation about bees, beekeeping, and specifically I'm thinking of some of the folks that I work with, their diagnosis kind of falls away. Like they're now a beekeeper, and that's what people are seeing them as. They're not seeing them as someone that has a disability. They're not being dismissed as only being able to kind of pursue one vocational pathway because they have this kind of expertise that falls outside of the kind of the normal realm for I think most of the folks in an urban setting.
Incredibly cool. We are really changing public perspectives quite a bit, and it's all connected to these tiny little bees. And there's, again, I'm an arts person, so I'm always going to drive it back to these like delicious little metaphors. But it is so cool that something so small can impact us in such major ways. I do want to, for those folks that are watching right now, I do want to remind you that if you have questions for our panel right now, you can go ahead and put those in the chat. I'll be able to check those out and we can ask them to the group here. I guess my next question kind of centers back to the city. So we've talked a lot about what beekeeping can do for individuals and certainly for community perceptions, but is there a larger thing that beekeeping can be doing specifically for cities, since we are talking about urban bees right now?
So there's a recent study that came out that actually talked about how urban beekeeping can become a negative for the ecosystems of different cities. And it's certainly true. There's only so much forage in a city, and there's only so many hives you can put there until they really start out competing each other. But one of the big things I think that urban beekeepers can do that you really can't do from a small town or from a more rural setting is the fact that just by the fact that we're in such a densely populated area, we can hit so many more people with our messages about how to get involved with beekeeping or how to take care of the environment. And again, I think it's really important for us. Most beekeepers that I know have a passion for the bees and they really love the bees, but in a much broader sense, they're really environmentalists and they really want to do something that has a positive impact on our planet. So for all of these people that we might see at a farmer's market down the block, or we might have in our class, or we just might be out and be talking about bees, I think it's a really easy way to reach a lot more people with this message, and it really gets them involved. Even if they aren't going to be beekeepers, or if they really don't care about bees, they might get a little bit more involved with their local park alliance, or get out and do something for the trees, or all of these little things that we can do to kind of change the way we live a little bit. So I think that's a big responsibility that we have as urban beekeepers, to remember that we have a little bit of a platform just for the fact that we are in these densely populated areas.
Yeah, I think it's very cool to be inspired to be the bees, as it were there. Yeah, very neat. Anything else to add, Mike or Nicole?
Yeah, like what Nick said, because I think also with city beekeeping, I think it also brings more attention to it. So now you have people who, let's say, are visiting New York and they find out, oh, I can do this group beekeeping tour in the city. So it's also like more of attraction, and people can actually learn and be educated on bees in New York City, holding bees and seeing bees. And just like what he said about, it can get competitive and along with the bees. But my personal opinion with that as well, last year we just found out that bumblebees are rapidly dying off, and which are local bees. And if you have bumblebees who don't actually allow human intervention, however, you have the honeybee that does allow human intervention. So you have bumblebees that do pollinate like 10 times more than honeybees, but if they're dying off and you have other local bees dying off, the ones that allow human interventions, they're going to have that responsibility as far as pollinating. So currently, right now, it is a limited, but who knows, in 5 years, 10 years, the honeybee might be dire to adding to neighborhoods. So how that's my personal opinion on it. But yeah, just like what Nick said.
Very, I mean, this is hero work we're talking about right here. Mike, did you have anything else?
I think I would mostly echo what Nick and Nicole have mentioned in that I think that in the city, I think because we're so connected with, even though it doesn't seem it, we're so connected with our ecologies where human interventions or human awareness really changes the environment in such a drastic way that I think that stronger awareness of the honeybee or just our environmental conditions in cities overall will never be a bad thing if folks are aware of the need for pollinator pathways or aware of the need for green spaces for forage. I think that there's opportunities to expand beekeeping, but only in connection with kind of any larger movements to kind of expand green space and kind of the sport infrastructure, the sort of ecosystem infrastructure that would allow for more populations.
Yes, and that definitely gets into sort of my final question, which I really appreciate for segueing so nicely into that, because we are talking about the future of urban beekeeping as well. And it sounds like what you were getting to right there, Mike, is the interconnectivity between urban beekeeping and the developing of greener, more sustainable infrastructure for our city spaces. So my last question for you all, and it kills me that this is the last question, but I'm watching the clock tick away here, is where do you see urban beekeeping going 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and beyond?
I definitely see it growing. I see more people are educating themselves and being educated. So I definitely see it, see more people doing it and growing, and possibly more programs out of it. You know, we can probably get it more in schools because of it, where there a lot of the beekeeping programs are in colleges. You know, maybe we can try and get that into trade schools because beekeeping is actually a trade. So that's where I hopefully hope to see it and be involved in 5-10 years from now as well.
Go ahead, Mike.
So I feel generally the same way. It's certainly on an upward swing right now. There's lots of people who are very interested in starting their own hive. Whether those people will continue or not, we'll see. But there are a lot of people who are getting into it for the right reasons and to do it responsibly. And I'm really optimistic about that. Certainly, Salt Tree and Nicole, and there's a lot of people who are. It's not just I'm investing in a business to like make a dime on this. There's a lot of people who are getting into it to really stick with it. So this is a very small fraction of people right here. There are a ton of people in a lot of different cities, and it's getting to the point these days that you can almost throw a rock and hit one of them, because really there's a lot of good work that's happening, and I think more of beekeeping is just becoming a little bit more mainstream. People are getting a little bit more connected to it, and I really see that happening more over the next few years.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. And Mike, I don't want to shortchange you if you had anything else you wanted to add.
Not too much. I mostly agree with absolutely everything that was said, where I could only see it expanding as kind of interest grows. But I look at New York City and their push to and not only the push, but some of the regulations now on mandating green roofs for certain size buildings and what will hopefully be kind of a more regenerative approach to urban planning as we kind of move forward, that I think could hopefully also open up kind of that infrastructure I mentioned for larger pollinator populations.
A optimistic future, and you are all pioneers on the front of that. So I applaud you for ending us on such a lovely little up note right there. Cannot thank you all enough for joining us today. I appreciate the time that you spent, but more than that, I appreciate the work that you are doing, speaking for myself, for the communities that I am a part of, and for the bees, because, you know, let's give them a voice. So thank you all so much. We have links to all of your social media and web pages on our homepage, which is, or not our homepage, but our festival page, which is, again, is salttree.art/fall festoon. So I deeply encourage that everybody who's watching right now to follow Nicole, to follow Nick, to follow Mike. There's some really cool stuff going on right there. Nicole, we didn't even talk about your interview in Teen Vogue, which was such a cool access point for beekeeping. It was very neat stuff. Yep. But you know, incentivize. Everybody should go check it out. Also, as I mentioned at the start of this program, this is the first of 3 live discussions that we're doing today. Up next at 3 o'clock, we have bees as collaborators in arts and science. We have a very cool panel of some just incredibly intelligent artists that are going to be speaking. And me, I'll be there too. You get a nice little mixed bag. And then later on today, we're going to be doing an interview with some international beekeepers speaking about log hives and stingless bees, because as we've mentioned today, honeybees are not, the westernized honeybees that we work with are not the only bees that are out there. So exciting stuff. And I hope again that you all check out all the cool stuff that's on the page. I think that's all I have right now. So again, thank you all so much. Thank you for joining, and thank you for being a part of the panel.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.